My name is Amelia Ward, 30 years old. When I look back now, it's almost absurd how ordinary that morning felt the one before everything shattered. The smell of coffee filled our kitchen sunlight, spilling across the marble counter, and Peter was humming to himself while adjusting his tie. I remember thinking, this is what peace looks like. For 6 years, Peter and I had built a quiet rhythm together. 2 years of dating, 3 years of marriage, and a lifetime's worth of small compromises disguised as love. He was steady, charming, and meticulous, the kind of man who would alphabetize our spice rack, yet forget my birthday if his sister texted him in distress. Ah, Lucy. 27, the only daughter in Peter's family, and a hurricane of entitlement wrapped in perfume. From the very first day I met her, she sized me up like competition. "So you're the woman who stole my brother," she had said with a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. Everyone chuckled, awkwardly. Peter kissed her forehead. I smiled and swallowed my instinct to walk away. She never hid her disdain for me, but Peter insisted I make an effort. "She's just protective," he said, as if that explained the way Lucy ignored me at every family dinner. I played along birthdays, holidays, endless little performances where I stood quietly while she basked in attention. But the night of Lucy's birthday party, something inside me snapped. It was a lavish affair at her favorite rooftop restaurant, the kind that smelled of expensive champagne and forced laughter. I wore the emerald dress Peter loved, the one that made him say, "You always look like spring in that color." He had been unusually distracted lately, scrolling through his phone, whispering to his mother about a surprise. I assumed it was for me. Foolish in hindsight. Lucy arrived late, as always, dramatic entrance and all. She squealed when she saw Peter clutching his arm like a child. "You didn't have to come, Pete. You're always so busy." He smiled proud. "You think I'd miss my baby sister's big night." Then came the gift. A white velvet box handed over with a grin. When she opened it, the room gasped, a breathtaking diamond and sapphire jewelry set from a luxury brand Lucy had been obsessing over for weeks. She screamed, hugging him so tightly she nearly spilled her drink. I clapped weakly. My heart, however, had gone still. $25,000. I knew because she had mentioned the price to her friends just days ago. Peter hadn't said a word to me about it. I leaned in close and whispered, "Peter, what is this? Where did you get the money?" He just smiled for the cameras and muttered through his teeth, "Not now." Not now. I could barely breathe. "Did you use—" "Yes," he interrupted, tone sharp. "From the savings. Don't make a scene." The savings. Our future. The account we'd promised never to touch until we had a baby. I walked out to the balcony, my hands trembling. The city lights blurred through my tears. When Peter followed, I could smell the champagne on his breath and his confidence melting away. "Why would you do this without telling me?" I asked quietly. He sighed, like I was the unreasonable one. "Lucy's been talking about this for months. I wanted to surprise her. I got a huge project at work, a big advance payment. It's fine, I'll replace it." "So you disabled the bank alerts too?" My voice cracked. "You thought I wouldn't notice." He froze. Then came the confession. Yes, he'd turned off notifications so I wouldn't see the withdrawal. He'd planned to tell me later when it would be too late to argue. I remember staring at him, realizing how small I'd become in his eyes, not a partner, just an obstacle. "What about our plan?" I whispered. "You promised me." He cut me off with a sneer I'd never seen before. "You wouldn't understand, Amelia. You don't have siblings. You're just jealous because I care about mine." I stepped back, stunned. Jealous of Lucy. He kept going, his voice rising sharp enough to draw eyes from inside. "You've been sitting at home for months doing nothing. Maybe get a job before lecturing me about money." That one line cut deeper than the betrayal, because I had quit my job with his encouragement. He'd said he believed in my potential. Now he used it as a weapon. My throat burned, but I refused to let him see me cry. "You're unbelievable," I said, and turned to leave. He shrugged, walking back into the party as if nothing had happened. Laughter swallowed my silence. Outside, the night air was cold and cruel. I drove aimlessly before pulling over by the river and finally let myself sob. The streetlights shimmered on the water like tiny shards of my dignity. I called my parents, voice breaking. "Mom, can I come stay for a few days?" They didn't ask questions, just said yes. That's the thing about family. You don't have to explain heartbreak for them to understand it. As I packed my bags that night, one thought echoed in my head. It wasn't about the money. It was about trust. And once that's gone, nothing, not even love, can save what's left. The first night back at my parents' house felt both comforting and humiliating. The room I'd grown up in, soft lavender walls, The old bookshelf filled with half-read novels felt like a sanctuary and a confession booth at the same time. I had left this home as someone's bride and returned as someone's disappointment. My mother Grace brought me tea in her familiar floral cup, her eyes filled with questions she didn't ask. "You don't have to tell me everything," she said softly, "but don't hold it all inside. Silence can rot you faster than anger." Her words cracked something open. I told her everything: the party, the gift, the bank alerts, the insult. She listened without an interrupting, just nodding slowly the way she used to when I got my heart broken as a teenager. When I finished, she sighed and said, "You didn't become a housewife, Amelia. You became his reflection, and he didn't like what he saw, a woman who reminded him of what he owed." I wanted to defend Peter, old habits, but the words caught in my throat. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, replaying every moment of our argument. His face, his voice, the cold indifference when he walked away. My mind tried to make excuses. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe he didn't mean it. But beneath all that noise was a small, steady truth: he did mean it. 2 days passed before he called. The first few texts were short, formal. "Peter, are you okay?" "Me, I will be. Peter, we need to talk." I ignored him. I wanted him to sit with the silence he'd created. When he finally called, his tone was weary, rehearsed. "I think you're overreacting. I just wanted to make Lucy happy. She's been through a lot lately." I laughed bitterly. "And you thought stealing from your marriage would help?" "It's our money," he shot back. "I earned it. You haven't been contributing." The words slammed into me like cold water. "You told me to quit my job, Peter. You said I deserved better." He sighed impatiently. "I said you'd find something soon. It's been 4 months, Amelia. Maybe it's time you stop waiting for the perfect opportunity." I hung up before I could cry. My hands were shaking, not just from anger, but from shame. I had built my days around him, cooking, cleaning, waiting for him to come home, convincing myself that temporary sacrifice was part of love. That evening, I sat with my father in the backyard. He was quietly polishing his old watch, a habit he had when thinking deeply. "You know," he said, not looking at me, "a man who feels smaller than his wife will always try to make her feel smaller too. It's how weak men balance themselves." His words stayed with me. Peter wasn't just careless. He was insecure, the kind of insecurity that turned kindness into control. By the end of the week, I decided I wasn't going back until he acknowledged what he'd done. But Peter had other plans. Late Friday evening, I heard the crunch of tires outside. When I looked through the window, his car was there. He stepped out looking disheveled, shirt half untucked, eyes red. My mother frowned, but opened the door anyway. "Amelia," he said softly, standing in the doorway like a boy who'd lost his way home, "I need to talk to you. It's important." My parents exchanged wary glances. My father crossed his arms. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it here." Peter hesitated. "It's personal." I took a slow breath. "Then say it. They deserve to hear what's personal now." He looked at the floor, defeated. "Please, just a few minutes." Something in his voice, the tremor, the exhaustion, made me relent. Against my better judgment, I followed him to the porch. The air outside was heavy, the sky bruised with rain clouds. He shoved his hands into his pockets, avoiding my eyes. "You were right," he said finally, "about everything. About Lucy, about the money, about me." I waited. I'd learned not to fill his silences for him. He exhaled shakily. "The project I told you about, the big client. We lost it. The company has to return all the advance payments, every cent. I already spent $25,000. They want it back by next week, or I'm done." My stomach twisted. "You're joking." He shook his head. "I asked Lucy to return the jewelry. She refused." I almost laughed. Of course she did. Peter's voice cracked. "I told her it's my job on the line. I begged her, but she said gifts aren't refundable. My mother said the same thing, that it's my fault for being stupid enough to give it in the first place." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. "I have no one left to ask, so I came to you." There it was, not love, not remorse, need. "What exactly are you asking me for?" I said quietly. "I need to pull another $25,000 from the savings," he said, "just to return the company's advance. I'll pay it back, I swear. But if I lose my job..." "Stop!" My voice was calm, but my heart was pounding. "You already stole from our future once. You don't get to do it again." "It's our account," he said desperately. "You can't just refuse. I'm trying to make things right." "Right," I stepped closer. "Right would have been telling me before you touched a single dollar. Right would have been not insulting me in front of your sister." He clenched his jaw. "Amelia, I'm drowning. Help me, please." For a split second, I almost did. Old love can still ache even when it's dead. But then I remembered the way he'd said housewife, the way Lucy had laughed behind her hand. I met his eyes and said quietly, "You made this mess, Peter. You clean it up." He flinched like I'd struck him. "You're unbelievable," he muttered, his voice low and angry. "You're supposed to stand by your husband, not kick him when he's down." "Then maybe you should have treated your wife like one," I replied. We stood there in silence, the distance between us wider than it had ever been. Inside the house, I could see my parents watching through the window, ready to step in if they had to. Finally, Peter whispered, "If you walk away now, Amelia, don't expect me to come back again." I looked at him for a long time, then turned toward the door. "Good," I said. "Maybe that's the first promise you'll actually keep." The next morning I woke to rain tapping on the window, soft, persistent, almost apologetic. My phone sat face down on the bedside table, flashing with unread messages. I already knew who they were from. Peter had sent 7 texts between midnight and dawn. "Please pick up. I'm sorry for yelling. I don't know what to do. Please, Amelia, just talk to me." Each message grew more desperate than the last. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Every word from him now felt like a rope, trying to pull me back into the same drowning tide I'd just escaped. But when he called at noon, my mother's voice broke through the door. "He's on the phone again, honey. Says it's urgent." Something in her tone told me this wasn't another plea. I hesitated, then answered. Peter's voice came through raw, hoarse. "Amelia, please, I need your help. Everything's falling apart." "What now?" I asked quietly. He exhaled shakily. "They gave me until Friday to return the full advance. That's 4 days. I tried the bank. They won't approve a loan that fast. Lucy still won't give the jewelry back. And my mom..." His voice faltered. "She told me it's my fault for choosing the wrong wife." The words hit harder than I wanted them to. I bit down on the ache in my chest. "She's right about one thing," I said. "You made a choice. Now you live with it." He fell silent for a long moment. I could hear the sound of traffic through his car window, the static of rain hitting metal. Then he whispered, "You sound just like them." "No, Peter," I said softly. "I sound like someone who's finally done being blamed for your mistakes." I hung up before my heart could betray me. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with my parents. The lamp cast a golden glow over the room, making the rain outside seem far away. My father folded his newspaper, studied me for a moment, and said, "You look lighter tonight." "I don't feel it," I admitted. "I feel hollow." "That's still lighter than before," he said, half smiling. My mother reached across the table and touched my hand. "Love doesn't end when you walk away, Amelia. It ends when you stop hoping they'll change." I wanted to believe her, but hope was a stubborn ghost, always finding ways to haunt the living. 2 days passed in uneasy quiet before Peter showed up again. No warning this time, just the sound of his car door slamming and hurried footsteps on the porch. When I opened the door, he looked nothing like the confident man I'd married. His eyes were bloodshot, his suit wrinkled, his hands trembling slightly as if he hadn't slept in days. "Please," he said, standing in the rain. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside reluctantly. My father watched from the hallway, arms crossed, but didn't interfere. Peter sat on the edge of the couch, dripping water onto the rug. "I'm sorry for the other night. I said terrible things. You didn't deserve that." For a second, I saw the old Peter, the one who used to stay up late helping me polish resumes, who made pancakes on Sundays, who laughed until he cried at bad movies. But that Peter had vanished somewhere between Lucy's tantrums and his own pride. "What do you want from me?" I asked carefully. He looked up, eyes pleading. "I need you to understand that I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to do something good for Lucy. She's always been..." "Selfish," I offered. "Fragile," he said too quickly. I almost laughed. "Peter, she's 27, not 7. You didn't buy her a toy. You bought her a $25,000 necklace with our money." He looked away, jaw tightening. "I thought I could fix everything when the project payment cleared. I didn't know the company would lose the deal. I didn't know..." "That's the thing," I interrupted. "You never know. You just decide and then expect everyone to clean up after you." He flinched. "I'm trying to make it right, Amelia." "By taking from me again." "I'm not taking," he said quietly. "I'm asking this time." The way he said it, almost like a child confessing, made me hesitate. For a brief, painful second, I wondered if this was what marriage had done to us, turned love into negotiation. But then I remembered the night on the balcony, his words slicing through the noise of the party. "You're just a jealous housewife." I folded my arms. "You said money isn't everything, remember, so figure it out without mine." Something hardened in his expression. "I thought you were better than this," he said, voice shaking. "I thought you had a heart." "I do," I said quietly. "That's why I'm protecting it. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, like a man surrendering, he dropped his face into his hands. His shoulders trembled. The sound that escaped him wasn't anger. This time it was something smaller, sadder, a kind of broken disbelief. "I can't lose my job," he whispered. "I can't lose you too." The room felt too quiet, the only sound the faint ticking of my father's clock in the hallway. For a heartbeat, I wanted to reach out to tell him it would be okay, that we could rebuild. But I stopped myself. Every time I'd comforted him before, it had cost me a little more of my own strength. "Peter," I said softly, "you already lost me the moment you decided Lucy's happiness mattered more than our trust." He looked up, eyes glistening desperate. "So that's it, after everything. After 6 years, you're just done." "No," I said. "I was done the night you called me a stupid housewife. Tonight I'm just saying it out loud." He stood staring at me as if trying to memorize something. Maybe the part of me that still loved him. Then without another word, he left. Through the window, I watched him drive away into the rain, his taillights fading like the last traces of a life I'd been trying so hard to hold together. My mother came to stand beside me, wrapping a shawl around my shoulders. "You did the right thing," she whispered. "I know," I said. My voice was steady, but my heart wasn't. Because doing the right thing doesn't always make you feel right. Sometimes it just leaves you standing in the dark, hoping that pain is the first sign of healing. The next day felt eerily calm, like the air, right before a storm decides whether to move on or destroy everything in its path. I told myself I wouldn't answer if Peter called again, but of course I did. Old habits die hardest when they are wrapped in love. His voice was quieter this time, stripped of all the anger and entitlement. "Can I come over?" "No," I said. "Whatever you have to say it here." A long silence. "Then I need to apologize, properly. Please, Amelia, face to face." Against my better judgment, I agreed. My parents were out at the grocery store, and the house felt empty too still. Maybe I wanted to see for myself if there was even a fragment of the man I'd married, still hiding somewhere beneath his pride. When Peter arrived, he looked almost ghostly pale, unshaven, his suit jacket damp from misting rain. He held no flowers, no gifts, just a thin folder and a look of exhaustion. "I thought about what you said," he began, standing awkwardly in the living room. "About trust. About us." I gestured toward the sofa. "You can sit." He didn't. "You were right," he said instead. "I was selfish. I thought I could fix everything with money, with gestures. I didn't realize I was just buying peace for myself." I stayed quiet, waiting. He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes tired. "When you left the house, didn't feel like home anymore. I kept expecting to hear your voice from the kitchen. It was so quiet, I could hear the clock ticking in every room." That image hurt because I remembered that same silence when he wasn't home, the way loneliness had started to settle into our marriage long before the argument. "I'm sorry for calling you names," he said, voice breaking slightly. "You didn't deserve that. You never did." It should have meant something hearing those words at last, but they felt like flowers laid too late on a grave. I nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that." He looked up, startled. "That's it? You're not going to say anything back?" I sighed. "What do you want me to say, Peter?" "That it's all forgiven, that we can just erase the way you looked at me that night like I was nothing." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I'm not angry anymore," I continued softly. "I'm just tired." He stepped closer. "I know I messed up, but I can fix this. I just need that one chance. If you let me use the savings to pay back the company—" I cut him off sharply. "There it is again." "What?" "You don't even hear yourself," I said, voice trembling. "You keep saying you want to fix us, but every time it circles back to the money. It's never about me." His face hardened. "You think I care about the money. I care about my career, my reputation." "Exactly," I pointed toward him. "Everything but your wife." Something in him snapped then. The remorse drained from his eyes, replaced by the raw edge of frustration. "I've been saving alone for months while you play the victim. You quit your job and sat at home, and I carried everything. The least you could do now is stand by me." My body went cold. "Stand by you," I repeated quietly. "You mean pay for you." He took a step closer, desperate, angry. "You don't understand what it's like to have everything falling apart around you." I forced myself to meet his eyes. "You're right," I said. "I don't understand. Because when everything fell apart for me, when the man I loved humiliated me in front of his family, I didn't have anyone left to steal from to make it better." He froze, breathing hard. The silence stretched between us, thick and sharp. Then, to my surprise, he sat down heavily on the couch, covering his face with both hands. His shoulders began to shake. At first, I thought he was angry again, but then I realized he was crying. I stood there for a moment, unsure what to do. The sound of his quiet sobs filled the room, breaking something inside me that I'd been trying so hard to keep whole. He looked up after a moment, eyes red, voice raw. "I've lost everything, Amelia. My sister won't talk to me. My parents think I'm a failure. My boss gave me 3 days to fix this or I'm fired. And now you're leaving me too. I can't breathe." For a second, he didn't look like my husband anymore. He looked like a terrified boy who had never learned how to ask for help until it was too late. I sat down beside him, cautious but soft. "Peter." He leaned forward, gripping my hands like a lifeline. "Please don't do this. Don't give up on me." His palms were cold, his voice shook, and despite everything, my heart ached. Because I did love him, I just couldn't save him anymore. I pulled my hands free. "I'm not giving up on you," I whispered. "I'm giving up on the version of us where I have to break myself to keep you whole." He looked at me, confusion clouding his face, as if he couldn't grasp the words. Then he slumped back, defeated. After a long pause, he muttered, "So that's it then." I nodded. "I'm going to talk to a lawyer tomorrow." The words hung in the air like smoke. Peter stood slowly, his eyes glistening again. He opened his mouth, maybe to shout, maybe to beg, but no sound came. He just looked at me, broken, small, and utterly lost. Without another word, he walked toward the door. Rain had started again, a thin silver curtain against the night. He stood there for a second, drenched in the doorway, before whispering, "You'll regret this." I met his gaze. "No, Peter. I'll grieve it, but I won't regret it." He hesitated, then turned and left his footsteps fading down the driveway. When the door finally closed behind him, I realized my hands were trembling. I sat back down, letting the silence swallow me whole. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled in the distance, not loud, just enough to remind me that storms rarely end all at once. They just move further away. That night, I drafted an email to the lawyer my father had recommended. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I typed the words I never thought I'd write. Subject: consultation request. Divorce proceedings. I hit send. Then I sat in the dark, tears finally falling freely. Not for Peter, not for the marriage, but for the version of myself that had loved him enough to stay this long. When the first set of legal documents arrived, the sound of the envelope hitting the table felt heavier than it should have. My lawyer, Mr. Lang, had warned me, even when it's the right decision, it's going to feel like a loss. He was right. The papers weren't just words, they were the death certificate of everything we'd built. Our shared plans, our future, the unspoken promise that love would somehow always be enough. I sat in my parents' kitchen, staring at the printed lines, Petitioner Amelia Ward, Respondent Peter Ward. The officialness of it made me nauseous. It was so final. My mother reached over and squeezed my hand. "It's just paper, sweetheart," she said softly. The hard part already happened. But it didn't feel that way. I felt hollow, like the ink itself had drained something out of me. That night I almost texted Peter. Just one message. Something small. "Maybe I'm sorry it came to this, but I didn't." Because what good are apologies when they always come after the damage is done? The following week was a blur of emails, signatures, and half-sleepless nights. I tried to distract myself, cooking, reading, even helping my dad repaint the garden fence, but the quiet moments always pulled me back to him, to us. I thought about the mornings he'd leave me coffee with a note from my favorite sleepyhead, about the night we danced barefoot in the living room because the radio was playing our wedding song, about how easily all of that turned into shouting and slammed doors. Love doesn't disappear, it just changes shape until you don't recognize it anymore. 3 days before the first court meeting, I got a text from Peter. "I know you hate me, but please, can I come by? Just to talk. I won't argue, I promise." My fingers hovered over the screen before I typed 1 hour, no fights. He arrived right at dusk, carrying a cardboard box. His hair was unkempt, his eyes puffy. He looked like a man unraveling in slow motion. "I brought your things," he said quietly, setting the box down. "The rest of your clothes, your books. And that mug you like." I nodded, unable to speak. He hesitated. "Can I sit?" "Go ahead." We sat across from each other in the living room, silence stretching between us like glass. Finally, he exhaled shakily. "I got the papers." I nodded again. He looked at me with disbelief, almost pleading. "How did we get here, Amelia? 2 months ago, we were talking about baby names. Now you're handing me divorce forms." My throat tightened. "Because 2 months ago, I thought we were on the same team." He shook his head slowly. "You think I wanted any of this? I was just trying to help my sister." I cut him off sharply. "Stop. You always say that. You were never helping her, Peter. You were enabling her, and punishing me for not doing the same." His voice cracked. You don't understand what it's like to have family who depends on you. No, I said softly, but I do know what it's like to depend on someone who keeps choosing everyone else over you. He stared at me for a long time, his jaw trembling. Then his voice dropped quiet and desperate. I can change. I am changing. I'll do therapy. I'll cut Lucy off. I'll do anything you want. Peter, I whispered, you shouldn't have to change for me. You should have wanted to change for yourself before it was too late. He flinched like I'd struck him. So that's it. After 6 years, you're just going to walk away. I swallowed hard. I'm not walking away. I'm walking forward. There's a difference. He looked at me stunned, like the meaning of those words hadn't fully reached him yet. His lips trembled. I still love you. I know, I said, tears blurring my vision. But sometimes love isn't the cure. Sometimes it's the poison. He broke then shoulders, shaking hands, covering his face. I didn't move to comfort him. I couldn't. Because I knew if I did, I'd crumble too. After a few minutes, he stood up, wiping his face. You'll regret this, he said, voice trembling with anger now instead of sorrow. I met his gaze. Maybe I will. But at least the regret will be mine. He stared at me for a heartbeat longer, then turned and walked out the door, closing it softly behind him. When his car pulled away, the silence that followed was deafening. It was the kind of silence that doesn't comfort, it condemns. Later that night, I unpacked the box he'd left behind. My books, my scarf, that chipped mug that once said Mrs. Ward. I held it in my hands for a long time before setting it in the trash. There was no anger in the gesture, just acceptance. The next morning, I met with my lawyer to finalize the petition. His tone was calm and procedural, but his eyes were kind. You're sure about this? He asked. Yes, I said, steady for the first time. Completely. When the clerk stamped the last page, a strange calm washed over me. I didn't feel triumphant or relieved. Just done. On my way home, I watched people rushing on the sidewalks, laughing, arguing, living. And it hit me how small one person's heartbreak really is in the grand scheme of things. The world doesn't pause for your pain. It keeps moving, and eventually so will you. Back at home, my mother hugged me tight, whispering, I'm proud of you. I smiled through tears. I don't feel brave. You don't have to, she said. You just have to be honest. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. No nightmares, no guilt, no restless replaying of arguments. Just the kind of sleep that comes when the war inside you finally ends, even if the battlefield is still smoking. 2 months later, I found myself standing in the courthouse lobby, waiting for the clerk to call my name. The air smelled faintly of old paper and stale coffee, and every sound, the squeak of shoes. The shuffling of folders felt louder than it should. When the judge finally signed off, the words came simply, your divorce is now finalized. Just like that. 6 years of love, of promises of laughter and exhaustion and forgiveness, all sealed with a single stroke of ink. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but instead there was only stillness, like I'd finally reached the end of a storm and didn't yet know what to do with the silence that followed. Peter was there, of course. He looked smaller somehow, like all the weight of pride had drained out of him, leaving behind only a tired man with eyes that had aged too quickly. He didn't speak until after the judge left the room. Amelia, he said softly, holding out a folded envelope. I wrote this. You don't have to read it now, but please just don't throw it away. I hesitated, then took it. Goodbye, Peter. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then stopped. For the first time since I'd known him, he didn't argue. He just nodded and walked away. The echo of his footsteps was the final sound of our marriage. That evening, I sat by my bedroom window, the envelope still unopened on my lap. Outside, the sun was setting, the sky painted with the kind of soft gold and violet that made you forget briefly how dark the world could get. When I finally opened the letter, Peter's handwriting hit me like a memory. Neat, slanted, careful, the same way he used to write notes for me on grocery lists and birthday cards. Amelia, by the time you read this, you'll probably hate me. Maybe you already do. I don't blame you. I've spent the last few weeks thinking about everything I did wrong, and the list keeps getting longer. I told myself I was being a good brother, a good son, but I was neither. I was just a man trying to prove I mattered by controlling the people who loved me. I made Lucy's problems my identity, and when you called me out, I punished you for it. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Amelia. You were patient, kind, smarter than me in every way that counted, and I repaid you with arrogance. I don't know if I can ever forgive myself for that. I'm going to try to be better. Not for you, I know I've lost that chance, but because you once believed I could be. Maybe someday, if our paths cross again, you'll see a man who finally became worthy of the love you gave so freely. If it's not too much to ask, don't remember me for the worst thing I did. Remember me for the man who once tried to make you laugh when you couldn't stop crying. Peter. I didn't realize I was crying until I saw the ink bleeding into the paper where my tears had fallen. The letter didn't change anything. The marriage was still over, the wounds still deep, but it gave me something I hadn't expected: peace. Because for the first time, Peter wasn't defending himself. He was simply owning it. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into a drawer, not to keep him close, but to remind myself of how far I'd come. Life didn't magically get easier after that. Healing isn't a straight line. It's more like a tide coming in, going out, bringing fragments of pain and letting them settle a little softer each time. I threw myself into the small business. I'd started a handmade stationery line I'd been designing in my downtime. It was ironic, I suppose, that I now made blank pages for other people's stories while closing a chapter of my own. Every morning, I'd brew coffee, open the curtains, and watch the light flood my workspace. The first few weeks were hard. Everything reminded me of what used to be. But little by little, the ache turned into something else: gratitude. Gratitude that I'd survived, that I'd chosen myself. One afternoon, while packing orders, I came across one of my old wedding photos buried in a drawer. I stared at it for a long time, the way I was smiling at him, the way he was looking at me, like I was his whole world. I didn't feel anger, just understanding. We were two people who had loved deeply but loved wrong. I took a deep breath and placed the photo back into the box, whispering goodbye, for real this time. Then I stepped outside. The air was warm, the scent of jasmine drifting through the garden. The world felt open again, uncertain, yes, but mine. For the first time in months, I felt light. Maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting, not pretending it didn't hurt, but finally being able to look at your past without wanting to rewrite it. Maybe love had broken me, but somewhere between the tears and the paperwork, I'd found something far rarer. Myself. Maybe one day I'll forgive him completely, I whispered to the wind. But today, I forgive me. And with that, I turned toward the horizon, not as someone's wife or someone's reflection, but as Amelia Ward, 30 years old, standing in the first sunlight of her own life.